Well, tonight we're going to continue the study that we've been in 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse number 12. Let's get the verse up there about being an example, being examples. And so tonight we're going to continue working through these very specific examples or areas of life that Paul gave to Timothy that he can be an example in. In the whole situation where Paul was speaking to Timothy, he was trying to get him to understand, and I hope that you guys understand this by now, that even though you cannot control other people's prejudice towards you because of your age, you can't control what an older person may think of you just because you're young. So regardless of that, you can't control that, but what you can control is your example to other people. And so the idea out of this whole series is that I don't want you guys to be intimidated anymore. I want you as young people to be the example that God has called you to be, and not only just within your youth group, but being an example to the entire church, to everyone in your church. Now, how many of you honestly just say, you know what, that kind of intimidates me a little bit? I think that was one of the discussion questions we talked about. How many of you would just put your hand up and say, it kind of intimidates me to think that I'm supposed to be an example to the older people in my church? Anybody? I feel that way as a young pastor. Good, thank you for that. And that's okay. But the point is this. Don't be intimidated anymore, okay? Paul says, don't worry about that stuff. Don't let anyone despise your youth, but be thou an example in these different ways. And allow your character, not your age, give you the authority to lead, okay? Let your decisions give you the authority to lead other people. So we've already talked about, this morning we talked about how our speech and our actions, our conduct, should reveal, I guess, our heart and what God is asked us to do. And the thing that I want us to notice is that the speech and the conduct, those are both external things, right? Those are things that we do on the outside that people see, and examples that we illustrate on the outside, and people can follow us then through those words and those actions. But now Paul kind of changes it, and he begins to challenge Timothy with inner qualities, with the things that are inside. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is we're going to look at two inner qualities. And the first one that we're going to talk about is learning how to be an example in charity, or being an example in our love. So write this down, in our love. Now, charity is a word, you see that throughout. It means love. It means an expression of love, and I'll define that here in a moment. But we are to be an example in our love. Now, I know whenever we start talking about love, teenagers get uncomfortable, right? Some of you were like this when I said love. You kind of moved your shoulders like this a little bit. And you're like, what is he going to say? Ugh, you know? Or we go, ew. All of these girls I know say, ew. I feel like I'm in a foreign country. All the girls on one side, all the guys on the other side. That's how every foreign country I've ever traveled to, that's how they have church. Anyway, it's okay. I don't know why I said that. No idea. But what was I saying? Oh, sometimes we think of, we think love and we get uncomfortable about it. And, I used to feel uncomfortable about it, like when my friends, like I have some pastor friends, be like, hey man, I love you. And I was always like, good talking to you. See you later, And now I'm like, yeah, man, I love you too. And now I'm at that point now where I say I love you too. And I have a particular friend. Well, you guys know, last year, Pastor Fountain, remember him, Dennis Fountain? Yeah, that guy says I love you all the time. Like, he says it a lot, maybe a little too much. Sends me text messages with hearts on either end. And, that's what makes us kind of uncomfortable. I'm going to text him and tell him that. That's not what, well, that's kind of what we're talking about. It's okay for Christians to love each other and to demonstrate love towards each other. That's not in a weird or a creepy way, okay? And so Paul here, he's talking to Timothy, and he says to him, I want you to be an example in your love. And he's not just talking about his marriage love. He's talking about in his love towards the people in the church. Paul also said in 1 Corinthians 13:13, he said, now abideth faith, hope, and charity, these three. And then look what he says, but the greatest of these is charity. The greatest internal, expression of our faith is this area of charity or of love. As well in 1 John chapter number 4, I've got this verse up here. It tells us, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. This is the thing that I want us to get tonight, is that as Christians, our love is to have a mark on everything that we do. Christian love is to have a mark on everything that we do. And not in kind of a cheap or a misunderstood or a worldly view of love, okay? But in genuine Christian love. Now, I know you've probably heard over the years in church that there's different kinds of love represented in the Bible. How many of you heard that before? There's different kinds. Anybody know the 3 different kinds? The Greek words? Help me out here with the Greek words. Anybody know? Okay. Agape. There's agape. Okay. What's the next one? Phileo, right? And what does that one mean? Brotherly. Man, very good. Philadelphia Eagles, right? Super Bowl champs. Did any of you watch the game? No? Okay. That's right. Oh, yeah. Well, any of you watch the replays? Okay. All right. Philadelphia Eagles. And then there's one other one that we don't talk a lot about. Anybody remember that one? Eros. That's the third one. What kind of love is that? Erotic love, yes. Sorry, I'm not laughing. It's funny hearing it from him. All right. So that's more of like a sexual expression of love. Okay. So the scripture gives us those 3 different ones. And so there's agape, phileo, and then there's eros. So the love that we're talking about here in this verse, the greatest of these is love. The love that Paul is telling Timothy to have is not eros, it's not phileo, it's agape love. So write that down. It's agape love. That's the love that he is talking about, that he wants us to be an example in. Now, agape love is a very straightforward expression of love. It is basically what it means is this. You can write this down. Agape love means to esteem. It means to have affection for, to regard, or to have a concern for somebody. So it's that kind of love where when you say to somebody like, man, I love you, bro. Right? Like we have the brotherly love, like kind of friendship love. This is a love that's genuine. So like when Pastor Fountain says to me, hey Paul, I love you, man. I know what he's agape loving me. Okay? We got to send him this clip, all right? He's agape loving me, meaning he's showing concern for me. He's showing care for me. Now, that's a good kind of friendship love, isn't it? I mean, like we have all people like, yeah, I love you, man. Maybe you don't say that, but yeah, girl. Do girls say that? Like, I love you, girl. It's like friendship stuff. But when you have a friend who says, I love you, you know what they mean when they're saying, like, I care about you, right? You understand that, right? I really care. I have concern for you. I really want to know how you're actually doing. And so that's what Paul's trying to get Timothy to understand. He's saying you can be an example, and this is what you need to know. You, as teenagers, can be an example in your genuine concern, your genuine agape love for the people in your church. If you have that kind of genuine concern, that genuine kind of warm love towards the people in your church, here's what's so cool about it, is if you actually have it towards others in your youth group and those in your church family, then that feelings of love towards them can only reveal itself in outward expressions towards them, okay, in kindness towards them. So this kind of love that he's talking about, if we're going to properly understand it, you have to think about a couple things. So number one, okay, write this down. This kind of love, if we're to be an example in this love, number one, it is more than a feeling, okay? Write this down. This kind of love is more than just a feeling. It's not a shiver down your spine, okay? Woo! I love my church family. That's not it, okay? It's a genuine thing. It's more than a feeling. And I really think to understand this, I got a quote up here, that according to the Bible, love is not just a feeling or emotion, but it is something that works itself out in action. Do we have that one? There it is. According to the Bible, love is not just something, not just a feeling or an emotion, but it is something that works itself out in action. See, this kind of love is less, it's not less than what we feel, but it's more than what we feel. Let me explain it to you this way. I am so glad that Jesus did not just feel love for us, but that his love for us resulted in action for us, right? Think about that. I'm glad that Jesus, his love for us, was not just, oh man, I really love the people in the world. I really love them. But his love was not just a feeling, it resulted in an action for us. Because God's feelings towards us really wouldn't have done much good, but because He came and He sent His Son and He died on the cross for our sins, and it showed up in an action, then it made a difference. See, the ultimate measure of our love, teenager, is not what you feel for others, but it's what you do for them. Okay, it's an outward expression of your love for them. And Paul's concern for Timothy was not that he would just feel love for others, but that he would act towards them in loving ways. And it was something that Paul needed to mention specifically for this big reason, okay? Write this down. Here's the big reason that Paul had to mention it. Because people are hard to love. Okay? How many of you would nod your head and agree with me? People are hard to love. They are. We're hard to love because we're sinners, they're sinners, and we're somehow trying to illustrate God in our relationship through this love. There's always trouble when sin meets sin, and so we have difficulty with this. But here's the thing, loving the hard to love is a way that we demonstrate our obedience to God. One of the best ways that you can show God that you love Him and that you're obeying Him is by loving people who themselves are maybe hard to love. It's how we demonstrate our obedience to Him because Jesus loved us even though we were hard to love. I'm definitely thankful that He loved me even though I was hard to love. He still reached out and He still demonstrated His love toward us. And it's a way for us to display to others a Christ-like humility. Ultimately, this is how we give a demonstration and evidence of our salvation. The love that we extend to others is the very same love that God extended to us through Christ. And so sometimes when we think about this idea of love, we think about people in our church family and maybe others in the youth group that we maybe don't like. One of the ways that we show Christ's love for us is simply by actually loving them in a Christ-like way. Now, I know that as a teenager, this isn't something maybe we talk about all the time. It's kind of maybe it's a deeper concept for some of you to wrap your minds around, but I think it is possible for you to do it. It took me a long time to understand this. But one of the best ways to show my faith as a Christian, one of the best ways for me to be an example is that I'm willing to love somebody who others maybe aren't showing love towards. And so this kind of love is more than just a feeling. But number two, our love then should be an example. So it's more than a feeling. It demonstrates in action, and it should be an example. So Timothy, Paul was saying to Timothy, he says, Timothy, I want you to be an example of Christian love. I want you to be an expression of love that you have internally that then is exposed, or I guess shown externally. And the setting for this, remember he's talking to Timothy, who's a pastor of the local church. The setting for this love to take place, this godly Christian love for brothers and sisters in Christ, was to take place within the context of the local church. And it was there that Timothy could set an example to the other believers. Now here's the thing, Timothy's challenge, or Paul's challenge to Timothy, is the same challenge that is to you guys here tonight, because you are called to love the people in your local church. You, as teenagers, should be some of the first ones to serve as a model or an example of what it means to love the people in your church family, especially if they are the ones who are hard to love. Every church, every youth group has people that are more difficult to love than others. That's a reality of life, okay? And we as believers should be the first ones reaching out to them. There are difficult people. And there's others that are harder to love just because they're maybe different, they're older, a different stage of life, whatever it may be. But regardless of the reason, the challenge is still the same. All of us have comfort zones, right? We talked about that, I think, earlier. We all have comfort zones. And we all have groups of people that we gravitate towards and people that we like to spend more time with. And none of those things are wrong. But within a church, if we're going to be examples, okay? If we're not going to allow anyone to despise our youth, but we're going to be an example, Paul says you need to be an example in love, and that happens in the local church. And it spreads beyond just your little comfort zone, okay? It means that we're to illustrate and reflect in our church that we are a community of people who love one another despite our differences, people who love one another through differences, and people who love one another because of our differences. Now, this is a concept that our world is trying to put in a bottle and tell everybody to do. Okay, I don't know if you go to Christian school and it's sort of packaged in this whole idea of acceptance. Okay, but you're never going to have true acceptance without Jesus Christ. And the thing is that what the world is trying to figure out, by having anti-bullying and then bullying people to accept certain things all through that process. And they're trying to, create all of this acceptance stuff that's going on. The thing is that as Christians, we already understand what that's about because that's what Christ did for us. He loved the unlovable. He worked through those and He loved us despite of that. And so in the local church, we're to be a picture of that. People from different backgrounds and different families and different places, different sin pasts who all come together. And because of Christ, we love one another and we work together and we show and demonstrate this aspect of Christ's love. See, the church is to be a place where God showcases what He's doing in our hearts. And here's another thought that I want you to write down. Your church needs you to be a Christian who displays your inner transformation by your outward actions. Your church needs that. No matter how big or how small your church is, they need you as young people to display the inner transformation through your outward actions. That inner transformation of love that demonstrates in actions of love towards other people. And we do that by serving the people that Christ gave His life for. I kind of want to give you a little bit of an opportunity here to put this into practice. Maybe not an opportunity, just maybe a way that you can do this. And you might have a hard time right now maybe fully understanding this. And we'll talk a bit more in our discussion time, a little bit more application side of it. But I want to challenge you guys to do something when you go back to your church this weekend. So today is Friday, tomorrow Saturday, and then Sunday. So you should be in church, right? Because we talked about that. Be there, be all right. Okay, you're going to be at church on Sunday. Good. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to try. No, I want you to do this. Just do this. Say, okay, we're going to do this. Okay? Write this down. I want you to start or begin to develop a friendship with someone in your church who is at least 10 years older than you. Write it down. We're going to put this into practice here. We talked about some of this early on, about you being an example to older people. And so I want you to do your best to develop a friendship to show Christ's love to somebody who you would maybe never talk to otherwise. Now, this does not include your youth pastor, okay? Your youth workers, your parents, okay? Somebody who you maybe wouldn't. Let's illustrate. What I'm trying to do is I want you to see this in action, okay? Someone who you would maybe never talk to at your church. Someone you would never connect with maybe at your church. They're just in a totally different place. And I want you to begin to develop a friendship with them. Reach out to them. Try to spend some time with them. And obviously it's not going to happen in a week. You're not going to be like, well, great, we're friends. It's nice talking to you today. And never talk to them again. That's not how it is. But try to reach out in this way that we've talked about. You will benefit from it. They will benefit from it. And God will receive the glory as you show your example by your love. We as Christian teenagers, as young people, Paul said to Timothy, be an example in your love. And so that's that first aspect, that inward aspect we talked about. But the next one we're going to see here in the verse is that we need to be an example in our spirit. Write that down, in our spirit. Be an example in our spirit. Let's look at the verse again. He says, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. All right, I want you to say that verse with me together. Ready? Begin. Let no man despise. Oh, no one's saying it. Come on, here we go. Ready? Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. Somebody jump up and say it from memory with your eyes closed, not looking at the screen. Come on. Oh, man, I thought like 10 of you were going to jump to the air, shouting out the verse at the top of your lungs. Jacob, give it a shot. You got to stand up and not look at the screen.
Let no man despise thy youth, but be an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity.
Nice. Let's give him a hand. All right. Do you have a prize or something we can give him? Up here? Anything I want? Oh. Well, it was a verse. That's just worth a little candy. All right, it's worth, let's see. Do you want a Mr. Big or a Coffee Crisp? He's so nice. He gets both for that answer. Good job. What a lovely spirit he has. Okay, so we're going to talk about in spirit. In spirit. So, when Paul is talking about our spirit, here's what he's talking about. He is talking about our disposition. He's talking about our attitude or our character. I would kind of put it more towards, especially with our age group, more towards our attitude. Okay, the way that we approach life, the way that we go into situations that we have. One of the greatest ways that we can point other people to Christ is when we as young people have a genuine, infectious attitude towards life. Here's the thing. If anybody has a reason to have a positive outlook on life, it should be Christian young people. You know why? Because we are saved. We know where we're going when we die. We have a purpose for living. We have a God who loves us no matter what. We have a heavenly Father who's there for us even when our earthly parents are not there for us. And we have all the reasons in the world to live in an infectious, in a outwardly expressive, positive way with a determination to work hard and to do our very best. We should be the ones who have the confidence then to do everything that we can to live life to its fullest because we're Christians. Now, we live in a world where a lot of teenagers are just depressed and dejected. I'm not going to ask how many of you have been through moments of depression in your life, but there may be quite a few of you who would say, yeah, I go through times like that. And I'm not discounting that at all, and I understand there's difficulty in things that we go through. But the fact is that if there's anyone on this planet who should have a good attitude and should lead the way by example in their heart and the way that they approach life, it should be us because we're saved. Because we know that heaven is our home. We have this part of our lives. In the days of Solomon, and there's a kind of a long story behind this, but I want to share a verse with you out of 1 Kings chapter number 11, verse number 28. It tells a story of a young man who had a good attitude, who approached life with a good spirit. And because of that, Solomon took notice. In 1 Kings chapter 11, it says in verse number 28, it says, "And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the," what was he? Young man. So he was young man, okay, so 40 and under, right? Same thing, we remember that. He was 40 and under, he was a man of valor. So Solomon saw the young man that he was industrious. Now that's not a word you hear too much anymore. That's an industrious young woman. You don't hear that, right? You don't hear that very often, but it's a good thing, by the way. Okay, it's a good thing to be industrious. It means you're hardworking. It means you approach things with zeal. It means you're excited about things. He says that he saw the young man and he was industrious. And so because he was industrious and he saw him, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. When it comes to our spirit, guys, you need to recognize that people take notice of not only what you do, but of how you do it. Write that down. If we're going to be an example of the believers, you have to realize that people take notice not only of what you do, but of how you do it. And having a good spirit, being an example, having a good and a positive attitude is something that can be a tremendous help to you. Not only in the church, and I'll say in the church it is necessary, and we must do it if we're going to be an example. There's a lot of people in our churches today who do good things in the wrong way. Right? There's a lot of people who do good things maybe, but it's just out of habit. It's just out of, well, I gotta do this. And they do it with poor attitudes. And honestly, they're a drag to be around, okay? But somebody who does the right thing in the right way with the right attitude, is excited about it, has the right heart behind it, that's an awesome thing. It's awesome to be around people like that. And it gives great benefit to the church. You can be an example in that way. But it also helps you in the world, I gotta tell you. If you'll approach life with a good attitude, with the right spirit, with a heart to do your very best, I got to tell you down the road as you get into your jobs, your boss will take notice of that. Your teachers will take notice of that at school. I'll never remember one of my first real jobs. Besides working at London Drugs at 5 a.m. when I was in high school, and that was the worst job. I one time fell asleep stocking shelves, and I fell right into the shelf. And the things that I was putting up, I knocked everything off because I fell like asleep. It was terrible. I was like putting deodorant, I think is what I was organizing there. So yeah, someone's there at 5 a.m. organizing the deodorants. And I fell right into it, hit my head, and it was, anyway, it was a good idea. But I popped up with a good attitude. Okay, that was one of my first jobs. But another job I had when I was in college, I worked at a Ford dealership called Brown Brothers Ford down on Marine Drive and Main Street, right? Is that where it is, Al? Yeah, Marine. And Al Perino works there today, and he has his job because of me, and you're welcome. But anyway, no. He's like, yeah, right. But one of my first jobs was there when I got home from college, and I was 19, and I had a good job there. And I really liked working there. Now, all the other guys that I worked with, I worked on the lot and I parked cars and I did some washing cars. I would deliver cars to different dealers and I did all sorts of stuff, driving all day. It was a lot of fun. But man, I love that job. But the other guys I worked with were they hated being there. They hated being there, and it was obvious in the way that they would do things. And they didn't like it. And a lot of people in the car industry, I'll tell you, there's a lot of mean people and a lot of really bad people, but Mr. Perino is a gem in the middle. There was lawsuits that happened when I was there between employees and all sorts of stuff that was going on. But for me, I was 19, I was in Bible college, I just surrendered my life to the Lord. Like, I just was glad to have a job, And so I did my very best. I was pumped. I got to drive like brand new Mustangs all the time. I got to drive new trucks. I got to do all sorts of fun stuff. And I just loved it. And I feel that, I know for sure my boss noticed my attitude. And that I was pumped to be there. And so as a result, I had a lot of really cool perks. One of the things that I used to get to do that not even the salesman would do was that the boss would let me take home Mustangs on the weekend just to drive for the whole weekend. And so when my girlfriend Jeanette would come visit me, we'd go out and we'd do donuts with Mustangs in the parking lots with a company car. It was awesome. I'll never forget being there while I was asking the general manager if I could take a car for the weekend, which I don't know where I got the guts to even ask that. But a salesman had just asked and he told them, absolutely not. You're not taking a car out. And I was like, hey, is it cool? He's like, yeah, no problem. Go ahead and take it for the weekend. It was awesome. And I had some special perks. My boss would give me extra money. He would do different things for me. And he says, because I realize that you're doing a great job. You love being here. You work hard and you do your very best. He said, all these other guys are just mopes, is what he used to call them. They're just moping around, just like fooling around. And so I had special perks because of it. Now, I don't tell you that to say that I'm anything special. All I'm trying to say is that if you as a young person today would approach life with a good spirit, with a good attitude, you will stand out above every other young person so quickly. So quickly. So many people in your generation just approach life like everyone owes them something. Well, you owe me this. They whine and they complain and they want the best things without willing to work hard. And listen, if you would just go into it with the right attitude that is based out of your faith and your walk with the Lord Jesus Christ, it'll change things for you. See, this young man here that we read about, Solomon took notice about his attitude. He took notice that when he was given responsibility that he had a good attitude about it. And so because of that, he was given more and more authority and more privilege because of his attitude. And the cool thing is this, not only did his attitude catch the eye of the king, but he caught the attention of the Lord. Later on, God himself gave to him the opportunity to lead God's people and to be ruler over tribes of Israel. Never underestimate the example of a good spirit. Never underestimate the influence of just having a cheerful personality. Okay, now many of you know Chelsea's older sisters, right? You guys know their older sisters. And how many of you know Joe Alapalo, right? Man, I love Joe Alapalo and I love Rochelle. They're great. But Joe, when she was in our youth group, she just approached life and still does with just a weird excitement. I just got to say, maybe there's something wrong with her. Maybe that's the problem. But she just approaches life. You guys who know her, she's awesome to be around, isn't she? Man, she approaches life just like, woo! She's all in. She's excited all the time. She always has a good attitude. And I know it hasn't always been that way for her, but for the most part, she approaches her jobs and all of that just with excitement. I got to tell you something. God used her and her sister in so many amazing ways in our youth group. And I really believe a big part of it is she just approached life with a good attitude and a good spirit. And people saw her example and they wanted to be like her. She is responsible for more people getting saved in our youth group and more people who are still in church today than anyone else I'd ever experienced in all my 9 years of being a youth pastor. And it's because she and her sister really just approached life with a good attitude. And you know what? They made a difference. They made a huge difference. There's quite a few people at Greater Vancouver whose lives are changed because of their attitude and their approach to life and just saying, you know what? I have joy of the Lord. Now, Chelsea may tell you a different story. I mean, like, man, my sister beat me every night when she came home, and took out all her frustration so she could be happy everywhere else, I don't know if that's the case. I don't believe that's the case. And if it is, I'm sorry. But she still made a difference with her attitude. And that's one of the things that always stood out to me about her. And she's just, still to this day, she's a joy to be around. She's an encouragement in the Lord. And I believe that she's an example to the believers of someone who has a right spirit. She's an example of someone with a good spirit. And I wish that every teenager would do that. I really believe that. You say, well, I'm kind of shy. You know what? You can be shy and still have a good attitude, You can be shy and still be respectful to people. Just because you're shy doesn't mean you have to be disrespectful. You can have a right heart. You can look up and you can respond to people in the right way. When you're given a task or you're assigned something, you can say, yeah, I want to do this. You can find ways to help out. You can ask, say, hey, is there anything I can do to be a blessing? How can I serve the Lord? What can I do? Have a right attitude. That is the kind of attitude that encourages and is an example to older believers. Like we talked about this morning, if some of you would get this idea and would approach things and approach life with a positive way, and instead of always being like, oh man, like I got to go to church and I got to do this and I got to say, man, what an opportunity to serve the Lord. This is a blessing that we get to do this. It's a blessing that I get to go, and the fact that I know I'm saved. Isn't that an awesome thing? There's so many people around who don't have that confidence. And they don't know what they're doing with their life, but you have direction. You have something to look forward to. You have the right attitude. And listen, I know it's not always easy to have this good attitude. And I'm not saying that you be a fake, okay? Because guess what? We'll see it. We'll know if you're being a fake. We all know what a fake is like, right? Teenagers especially know a fake. I don't know what it is. You guys have this special fake radar. It's part of the other antenna on the back of your head or something. And you know if someone's being a fake. So don't be a fake. This is a genuine outflow of a heart issue that's going on, not heart issue, but a good thing from our walk with the Lord Jesus Christ. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse number 10, I think is a great verse for every teenager to memorize. It says, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might. Whatever circumstance you find yourself in, whether it's your school at the time, whether it's being obedient to your parents, whether it's serving in your church, whether it's being a part of a youth group, whatever it is, just go all in. Do it with all your might. Man, I got to tell you, I'm not trying to sound like a real old guy, but there was a time where teenagers were known for living this way. There was a time where teenagers were known that whatever they did, they were like all in. I mean, they were all about it. But today it's not that way. Everyone is so disconnected, and I think a big part of it is because of these things right here. But we're so disconnected, we're so living in our own little digital world that we're completely apart from being all in and doing everything with our best of our ability, because all we're thinking about is, I got to post about this, right? I got to go and talk to my friends online later on about this. Whatever it is that you're doing, go all in and have it with a right spirit and a right attitude. And if you do that, you will be an example to the believers. And despite your age, you can demonstrate a heart of love and a cheerful attitude when it comes to being an example in the local church. And I got to tell you, you will be blessed when you live in this way. You will be blessed as you demonstrate love to others in your church family, and then you begin to experience their love back to you. You'll be blessed when you involve yourself with the right attitude and you see God give you blessings and you see more responsibilities and opportunities given to your life. You'll be blessed by it. And so tonight, as we go into our discussion groups, I just want to encourage you in these two areas to be an example. And this is what you're going to talk about with some follow-up application questions. But listen, don't let anybody despise your youth. Let's be an example in our love. And let's be an example in our spirit.